Hi, everyone. Let's get started here. We had a bit of a technical hiccup, so one of our speakers who was going to come in on Skype won't be doing so. So we'll run with our crew here and have a little bit more time for questions. So the way that we're gonna run this panel, I'm going to give a quick introduction to who the folks are who are up here. Each of them is going to have about 10 minutes to talk about their topic, and then we're gonna want to have questions and discussion in the room. That's sort of our goal here. So I'll do a very quick introduction. So the speakers are going to be Chris Keene, who's the head of library and scholarly features at JISC. Varsha is the one who will not be joining us, unfortunately, via Skype. Maria Bond will then speak. She's the editor, Journal of Electronic Publishing and senior lecturer at University of Illinois. And then Daniel Michin, he said that was close enough. Is the founding editor of the Rio Journal. So let's take it away.
Well, hi everyone. I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes about what we're doing in the UK and what JISC in particular is doing about university presses and university publishing. So just a bit of background in I think some of the unique things about the UK, which may be a bit different to what others are finding. I think generally speaking, we've got quite a sort of strong government policy about research assessment, both with our sort of every 6 years REF, where many academics are submitted for assessment by panels from the main government funders, which includes their research outputs and impact and other metrics. The next REF in 2021, will probably be 2021, will include a requirement to have all your articles open access, which obviously is quite a driver. Our main funder for research grants, RCUK, Research Councils UK, also have requirements for open access. So a lot of the work around repositories and open access and that sort of area is currently driven by conforming to those policies, so supplying data to funders and recording metadata around that. So it's got a slightly different edge there. Some of our traditional university presses, if you want to call them that, perhaps compared to some other countries, have almost are more similar to commercial publishers. Cambridge and Oxford University Press, without wanting to single them out, so you can't single out two different presses, can you? Perhaps I've over the time are more at arm's length to the university and are almost separate organisations. But we are seeing at the moment quite a surge in new university presses being set up, and we've kind of coined this term, well, perhaps we haven't coined, but we are using the term new university presses to, and I'll come on to more to that in a second. UCL is quite a high-profile example where they've a strong open access emphasis. The UCL press was taken back in-house and organised and driven down from the library. The Right Rose Consortium, which is 3 universities close by to each other, roughly in the north, Sheffield, Leeds and York, which already had a sort of strong partnership, have just set up a shared press between them, which is, again, a strong open access element. Also a sort of a focus on textbooks as well, which seems to be another sort of trend coming along. And I mentioned Huddersfield, who have got a fairly small press around monographs. They are quite interesting in the way that they've justified it, is they're saying, well, these books we're publishing for our academics, they're able to submit to the REF because they managed to publish these books, and the money that brings back into the university more than offsets the cost of running the press. So they've done some work there in trying to help. One of the key questions is about sustainability and business models and costs and how you justify the expense, which is an expense, of running a local university press. Last month, in March, there was a conference in Liverpool run by the University of Liverpool called the University Press Redux. Again, I think it was showing the kind of quite a lot of interest at the moment around this area, and I think sort of since last summer, about 5 new university presses have been launched. Moving on to JISC, I think many people have heard of JISC, but in the last few years we've perhaps changed our focus a bit. We're more focused on, we're less focused on funding lots of different initiatives, more focused on building and developing new services which higher education and similar in the UK can benefit from. So a couple of things that have come out in the last couple of years. The first was some work we did a couple of years ago called the National Monograph Strategy. We worked closely with various stakeholders, librarians, publishers, academics, and various other people to try and draw together what the critical issues were around monographs and how we could address those. And secondly, there was just launched this year a 5-year study with Open and JISC looking at open access monographs, and that came out with quite a lot of conclusions and recommendations in this area. So specifically, the National Monograph Strategy Roadmap suggested that JISC in particular develop a shared publishing platform to help with new innovation in this area and to help lower the barrier of entry. And we sort of fully acknowledge that technology isn't the big issue around setting up a university press, but it's felt that that could be something which would be helpful in facilitating universities in developing presses in this area. So we're interested in new university presses and academic-led presses. By new university presses, we're meaning those which are mostly OA, those which are closely linked to the university, closely linked to the library. The word lean often comes around. They're perhaps doing less things than a traditional publisher. Those things they're doing with fewer resources and are doing in a more leaner way. Some talk about not cutting out things like marketing. Others still have a role for that, but perhaps in a more reduced capacity. And the other area that really interests us is academic-led presses. So hopefully most people have heard of Open Library of Humanities, where it's got quite a unique business model where libraries will contribute to the running of the press while it's free for academics to publish, it's open access for those to access, particularly due to the nature of funding in the humanities. Also open book publishers, and Tim Gower's fairly new discrete analytics journal. So it seems to be that academics are doing quite a lot of quite interesting innovation in the area of new ways around peer review, new models for publishing and business models. And we really want to help them to do that by again, reducing those sort of barriers about if they have an idea, how can they get the technology in place to help them with that. So the current work in this area is we're currently looking at the state of play, especially within the UK, about what universities are interested in, what universities are doing what. We know that many are looking at setting up a university press or have set up a university press, but we really need to know those numbers. What are they doing? How? What are their policies? What are their concerns? For those who have not or are thinking about this, what are their plans? What do they want? What do they need? And what are their aspirations, which may be a bit different to their plans? What would they like to see in the future? Where would they like to go, should they have the power to do so? And the key thing for us is what are the gaps? What can they not do easily at the moment? There's no point us recreating what's already out there in the market. What could we be doing? What's a bit unique in this space? We're working with a group of universities called the Northern Collaboration and some academics in Coventry in carrying out a study in that area, and we'll be reporting those findings in the late summer, maybe early autumn, once we have holidays. So the key thing is we use that information to work out where the demand is and what people want and what they need, and look at whether we can provide some sort of shared pass the horse. That's a classic analogy. We also want to say, well, let's think about the future. Are there new innovation here? Can we support new business models, new types of formats beyond the PDF? Can we look at new ways of disseminating this information, looking at that sort of the whole idea of reproducible science, and bringing in data and other components into the research output process. We don't get a strong demand from that at the moment, certainly when we're talking informally to librarians and those we've spoken to, but we are quite interested in that area, and we're hoping that we may be able to incorporate some of those ideas into something we develop. So that was my slides. Thank you very much.
So we're going to move things around a minute here because it sounds like Susanna's going to stand in for Varsha, which means we need to jump. Here we are. So Maria.
Thank you. The rearrangement may be fortuitous. Chris and I have not spoken before, but there are a number of interesting to me intersections in our discussion. We'll talk after. So I'm here today to talk about Publishing Without Walls, which is a new publishing initiative to understand, and we'd like to think meet, the needs of scholars in a contemporary publishing environment. So a brief description of our project. Very briefly, it's a new digital scholarly publishing initiative from the University of Illinois. And it is a partnership between the University Library, the Graduate School of Library and Information Science, where I'm located, the Illinois Program for Research in the Humanities, and the Department of African American Studies. We have a 4-year award from the Mellon Foundation. We started last year, and work is now underway. So what are we trying to do? Well, what we want to do is to build capacity for participation in innovative publishing initiatives. And by building capacity, we mean both our own local capacity as librarians, technologists, providers of services, as publishers, and the capacity of the scholars whom we support. We want to get them more engaged in digital means of publishing and innovative means of publishing. And my piece of this world, so this is the one I'll focus on for a bit, is to conduct research and assessment of how emerging technologies align with the expressed needs of the participating scholars. What do they want to do? How are they going to do it? Is it working for them? Can we help them? And we, of course, modestly, our ultimate goal is to create a new model for the conceptual development of scholarly communication. So the research piece, and as I say, this is mine. What we're trying to do is understand, are you scholars out there? What are you up to? What are you thinking when you think about publishing? What's your current practice? And what are you trying to do? What are your objectives? And how do you think about the options that are available to you? What are your requirements for those options? And we're using pretty traditional qualitative research methods, one-on-one interviews, both with scholars who work with us and those who choose not to, focus groups, particularly at disciplinary conferences, and surveys. And we'll be casting a wide net with our surveys, trying to understand what scholars are thinking about the publishing process and the means available to them. And let me say, right now, we are focusing as an entry point on humanists for the most part, partly because that was what the Mellon Foundation was very interested in. They wanted to understand how publishing practices in the humanities might shift, but we like scientists too. And if you're interested in being a research subject, we'd love to hear from you. We just started recruiting. We just got through all our IRB approvals last week. And so we're looking for likely subjects. This is just a smattering of the kinds of questions we're asking. We have a million of them. But these are the kinds of things we're trying to get at through these various research methods. What are your scholarly goals? What impact would you like to have? What are your professional goals? How do you make your choices? How are you thinking about sharing the work that you have underway now? Do you need to get it out fast? What kind of priority is that? Do you have an ideal form of publication in mind? And if you do, are there barriers to realizing that form? And can we help? And we're also asking about past publishing experiences of all kinds. And have they been satisfying, dissatisfying? How have they helped you to meet your goals? It's just a quick look at what the process looks like from an author-scholar's point of view. Author has an idea. They come in and work with us at a number of stages, consulting, incubating, making choices, and then make some kind of choice about a means of probably digital delivery, such as, and these are examples, not limited to this, a multimedia platform, an ebook, an exhibition, and then we help them move into the production phase where ultimately it becomes a Publishing Without Walls publication. We're also partnering with 3 university presses. So if the scholar's goal is to have the imprimatur of a university press and the content is suitable, we're trying to match it with those presses, and we might have the online publication through Publishing Without Walls, and the university press might do a traditional print monograph. And as the university presses are also beginning to develop online publishing mechanisms, we may have a pipeline there too. And the presses are participating in this as an experiment, trying to figure out if we can help get them content that they can use and that is ready to disseminate. A few pilot publications. These are people who actually sought us out before we began outreach, so there was demand in different stages. Water After Borders is a big conference underway next week about transboundary water systems. Don't ask me what that means. And the organizers want to produce something from there. There's a music publication to accompany a university press book in ethnomusicology, a new online multimedia journal called Media N, designed for new media studies and also new media art, and a translation of a heretofore untranslated work by Georges Clemenceau about Monet that's being developed and published online that will also have a print component. We're launching with 2 series, one in African American Studies, which is done in collaboration with the historically Black colleges and universities. And that aims to bridge the digital divide in these often under-resourced institutions, trying to get their scholars kind of up to speed and engaging in digital scholarly communication. And we're also working with the Global Midwest, which is Mellon-funded series of grants administered through our Humanities Center that are designed to incentivize humanities collaboration. In order to get an award, you have to be collaborating with somebody in another institution. And we're reaching out to their scholars, offering to help them think about their publication strategies and to help them realize it. We do, of course, intend to take over the world. This is how far we've gotten to date. So this is our reach through our partner presses, through the Global Midwest. The light blue dots are selected historically Black colleges and universities. There are more than 100. These are the ones we've been able to reach so far and with which we are having active conversations. Those blue dots will start spreading west soon. Just to give you an idea of the kind of content we're looking at in the first phase, these were the Global Midwest awardees. Coincidentally, and not really connected to this panel, Robert and I are awardees on the Humanities Collaboration and Research Practices. So we're working together on that. But these are the awards from the first 2 rounds of funding. And an interesting thing in reading the statements for the awardees, I read them after they've been awarded, is that they almost all have some kind of digital outcome projected. And including, and this is not limited to, but these are the ones that came up a lot. And so they're all thinking about some kind of vehicle, digital vehicle for expressing their work, but they don't always know how to get there. And that's one of the things that we're trying to help them with. It's like, okay, so how do you realize this? How do you make this possible? So in brief, what we're doing is providing a kind of scaffolding and infrastructure to help the scholars build out their publications. Tools, services, consultation, and in some cases, connections to university presses. We want to help them engage in all aspects of digital publishing. I'm going to move quickly because I'm going to keep us on time here. And we're helping them to navigate a world of choices. We understand that they have a lot of publishing choices and that they may be confused by those choices. And so trying to help them think through what tools and services help them meet those choices in order to be clear on their goals and to get their publication needs met. And to think about what are their publication needs? Why do they want to work with a publisher? What are they trying to have addressed? So to conclude, this is how we hope it all comes together. Our research informs the development of tools and services, hoping that what I uncover in talking to all these scholars will create information on which we can draw in building tools and services, and that their goals, the goals of the scholars, will inform the deployment of those tools and services. And we hope that the access to those tools and services provokes the imagination of our scholars, and that the imagination of the scholars aspires to new possibilities for the communication and reach of scholarship. And so this multivalent, very collaborative effort realizes new possibilities for the communication and reach of scholarship. And then the world is a better place. Thank you.
So, thank you. Also, I would like to thank the others who have given talks so far because they really prepare what I want to talk about. And we already heard in the previous session that it's important to kind of keep track of research ideas. And we were just hearing about digital outcomes, and Rio is a journal that just combines the two. It's about research ideas and outcomes, and it's in a digital-only format, although you can have it printed if you want to. And the idea behind it is actually to what was discussed by the science journalist in the previous session, like how can we make the process more visible? Not just kind of the way that current science journalism works is typically via that press release that says scientists have found out something. Wine is good or bad for your health, these kind of things. But they really rarely help you understand as to why the scientists are tackling this problem, or why they are tackling it this way, or how they're actually tackling it. And so the question is, and as was enumerated in several contexts in the previous contributions to this session, how can we make this process of actually doing research more visible? And I would like you to take like 30 seconds or so to think about a research idea that you are working or have been working in the past, and then think about how many traces this has left in the public, whether you're still working on it or not. You don't have to tell me, because people are very often kind of very circumspicious about sharing their ideas. But my hedge, and we're back to another theme, is that the traces are much less than what you've actually done. Then now think about the things that you have actually produced on the way, or if you're just contemplating an idea, the things that you are planning to do, to produce on the way towards solving that particular problem that you're interested in. And then we have things like research ideas, proposals, data management plans, and all those different things that come on the way. Who here has written a research proposal in the last 2 years? Basically checking whether you're all asleep. So leave your hands open, no, up. Leave your hands up, please, if you've written a research proposal in the last 2 years. And now raise your other hand if any of those is public. Yeah, we have a few, but most of them, that's not. The question is, why not? Maybe you can, those of you who have had both hands open, you can briefly explain why you've made that public. Peter.
Well, I've published a research proposal in Rio Journal
Okay, any other comments on that? And, well, we didn't make this up here. But the point here is that there's actually value in sharing the research process. Like, coming back to the baseball thing, you saw that terrible summary that was given. And in academia, we basically only share those summaries. We don't share the process. But as we saw through the visualizations by Cesar, it was TV that made baseball popular. We're not those summaries. Just imagine we had a similar thing going on in research. Imagine people could be following our research live on TV, live in stadiums. They have done this, like Otto von Guericke, when he did this famous experiment with the vacuum spheres and the horses. Everybody in town wanted to see this. And that was like in the Middle Ages when they were still believing in the witches, as we heard. Just imagine we would be using the means of communication that we have to actually build on that potential excitement in the crowd. I'm getting excitement while I'm telling about this. And opening up the process so that people can come and watch the scientists do stuff, that people can come and engage with it, the same way they can engage with a baseball game, or even further. In a baseball game, when you're watching it, you're not allowed to participate. In science, you can. There's citizen science. There's no citizen baseball in that sense. Of course, everybody can play citizen or baseball, but you can never play with the big ones. But in science, in principle, you can now if we're doing things openly. And I'm just explaining all these things because Rio is an attempt to tackle those issues in a way that is, well, progressive enough to move things forward, but still not too different from a journal so that people can kind of relate to it. And so we call it a journal, but it has many features of other communication channels. This starts, for instance, if you just look at the homepage, you have browse articles, like in any other journal, you have an ISSN and things like that, but you have start a manuscript. So there's an associated authoring tool, which allows the journal to actually produce XML at the press of a button, rather than sending it to India, wait for 3 weeks, and then get the proofs and things like that. It has other features, so we will just, I don't have too much time to actually show all those features, but I'll give you a brief tool. So if you browse the articles, you notice those little icons here that actually map the research that is published to societal development goals. That's another area that is kind of the taxi driver story that Peter was referring to. Like, why does society fund the research? Because the research sometimes helps address societal problems. Maybe not all kinds of research help address the societal problems we have now, but hopefully it will contribute to the body of knowledge that will allow us to tackle societal problems eventually. And so here we're trying to make this explicit. So every paper is basically mapped to those 17 sustainable development goals. The altmetrics session is in parallel, but of course, like basically any other journal, we have altmetrics. But what you see here is we have research ideas, different kinds of publications. You can sort by publications. So for instance, you can look for just the NSF or NIH grant proposals, something like this. Let's go for that one. Here we go. So well, we started publishing in December, so we haven't published too much. But we have probably published more grant proposals than any other journal. And so it goes for data management plans. And the idea here is also keeping young researchers in mind. Right now, when you're a young researcher and you want to apply for like a PhD position or a postdoc position, you don't have very much to show in classical terms of outputs. You have those 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 papers if you're really good. But you have produced lots of things on the way. You may have written a tool. You may have produced a new instrument. You may have done lots of other things, or a questionnaire for, as we saw in the previous presentation. All these kind of things are valuable outputs that other people can build on. And Rio is designed to actually make all of that available. And then once it's available, you can, well, everyone can review it. It's all open license, so it can be reused like in another journal. But it's machine readable from the start. So we really go beyond the PDF. Yeah, and it's versioned. So that's another problem in current science communication. Most people, when they publish something, they consider this finite. In Rio, you can publish an updated version. And that is one way to encourage engagement with the community. 1 minute left. Okay, so my summary here is we have an attempt, a journal that tries to show or to publish the entire research process. Think of it as an embedded journalism. That concept is unfortunately mostly reserved to war, military context, but just imagine to have a journalist embedded in your research process, or if you don't have one, then you can still publish your entire research process so that the public can engage. You can find new collaborators, potential students, or even potential journalists or funders this way. And the idea of publishing the entire research cycle is certainly something that I would like to see adopted and promoted by the community at large, not just Rio Journal, but the Rio Journal is a tool that we try to use in order to stimulate discussion about that idea. What can we do better? Open access, open data are typically just discussed in terms of publishing the final bits and pieces. Even in the context of Zika right now, the data sharing policies that the funders and other institutions have, they typically kick in only at the moment of formal publication, which may be months or even more from the point of initial submission. But in an outbreak like this, where it's critical to be quick, then those months actually matter. And so if you publish your research cycle whenever a step in it is completed, then it's much more easy for the community to build on that and to engage with your research. Okay, I'll stop here.
Brilliant. So thank you very much. Well, I'm definitely not Vasha Kordiak, as some of you know. So Vasha, unfortunately, is remotely connected, but we could actually make the technology work to get her to present. So I'm going to present on her behalf. So my name is Susanna Sunta-Sansone. I'm from the University of Oxford, but I also actually am a consultant for Nature Publishing Group and the academic honorary editor of Scientific Data, for which Vasha is the editorial curator. So I have a relation actually with what the topic's being presented. Okay. So what Scientific Data is, it's an open access data journal that we launched last year. So it's part of the Springer Nature family. And it's about it's about really focusing on the data reuse, data credit, data publication, because the main article type, it's a data descriptor, which is a data paper, although we have a new type of article as well that complements the data descriptor. So if you want to know more about Scientific Data and the way we make also the data, the experimental metadata, browsable and searchable and visually presented through what we call the Eyes Explorer, I have a poster tomorrow. You can come and see me too. Okay, so what actually, let me try to... The animation, it's gone. Right, okay. So Vasha put together a couple of very nice slides that try to tell, positive story, encouraging people to publish the data, because data papers do give credit to people that actually work in creating those data sets which underpin the traditional article the way we know it. So this is just an example of a Nature Biotech paper which complements the Scientific Data article, or you can say vice versa. So the biotechnology, the Nature Biotechnology article described this new assembly algorithm that's been developed. The associated data paper in scientific data describe all the data sets, how the data, all the sequence data has been created, has been packaged, and can be reused. So he gives the amount of information, the data paper, that you can't find in the Nature Biotechnology article. But what's really more important here, and I hope the animation works, that if you look at the paper, the author from the Nature Biotechnology article and the one in scientific data, only few overlap. What really this means that very typically the people who actually create the data, being the postdoc, perhaps which has done some of the work, or the technologist, the data analyst, which done perhaps a minor role, or even the data curator, don't feature in the big article. And so this also means that he really highlights and gives credit to the people that do create the data set and make that data set describable in a way that is reusable. So the other example, I have a problem with the animation, it's this one. Let me try to avoid the animation. Brilliant. It's that a data paper do make the data more reusable. And this is another example of a successful story, a real one. So we have Daniel right there, who actually knew about the data set that Chris had created, this fMRI data set, even before actually Chris even published in Scientific Data, because he shared it on Torrent Exchange, the data set. But because Daniele doesn't really work in the same field that Chris does, he could not understand how to reuse the data set, because the data set, the data file, didn't come with many descriptors, with many metadata attached to it to describe how to reusing it. It was only after Daniele saw the Twitter from Scientific Data advertising the publication of the data set from Chris, describing what actually was done, all the steps, and how somebody else can reuse, that Daniele finally accessed the data and was able to reuse it. So let's just have a quick look how actually we really compared the traditional article with the data paper. And the traditional article, it's really about the discovery, it's about the hypothesis, and how you reach those. And we do know that not all the data get presented in full. And those data set is valuable. Perhaps the usual negative result, as we all know, never get published or mentioned or deposited somewhere. The data paper does complement a traditional article because it allowed the author to describe exactly how the data set was created, the entire data set, a lot of information which never get into the traditional article. Now, a publication of a data journal does not preclude a traditional article, certainly not within the Nature family of the journal, but also many other journals do, as long as, indeed, there is additional value to the traditional article on top of a data journal. So let me try to remove the article too. This is just another going to the detail of how we created these data descriptors. So the data descriptor, because it's about data, it's not just narrative, because then it will be too simple anyway. We associate the narrative with a machine-readable metadata descriptor, which Varsha herself curate and enrich with the help of the authors, but reading also the text of the paper. And that machine components, it's in a format called ISA format, which then it's visualized through this ISA Explorer, where you can browse the data set. So you don't just go and browse the homepage of Scientific Data and the article. You browse the metadata. You query by species, you query by technology type, you query by the type of repository the data it's seen, and you retrieve the data set and the associated article you like. As I say, the poster tomorrow, I can show you what that is. So Scientific Data complements existing repository. That's very important. There is no repository old at Nature Publishing Group. There is only this experimental metadata in ISA format that links and point to the data file which are in the public repository. And Scientific Data has created and maintained a list of over 80 repository, and we help the author to go to deposit the data in the right repository, which is appropriate to their discipline, but also has the right criteria of sustainability, identifier, and so on and so forth, which is important for preserving preserving those data for the people that read the journal and others. And those list of repository, it's also something that, that if there is another poster tomorrow, I'm sorry that I keep referring to the poster, but it's called BioSharing poster, because we work with this registry of database and standard, because the list of database and standards that we recommend to the author are created through this registry. So it's also important to acknowledge that a growing number of institutional repositories are coming to the fore, and it's important to acknowledge that some data has to go there too, and particularly where there is no specific discipline repository. So we do allow, indeed, users to submit their data set to the institutional repository, and we have a workflow for this. We allowed, first of all, we do accept the data descriptor because we don't want to stop this to happen, and then when the author tell us that this is the institutional repository they want to submit the data in because nothing else exists, then we also we make sure that as a journal, we contact the institutional repository, and we have an internal check. Well, actually, we have a public checklist on the website that, with some criteria that we need the repository to be able to meet for us to say, yes, it's a secure and appropriate place to place your data. And we need to be sure that the DOI get minted, and then once the repository gets accepted, it's also available to the author through the pull-down menu of the submission, the article submission system. And let me also conclude on the topic of data citation. And there's a couple of animation here. So first of all, because it's a data paper, it's important to cite the data correctly. And as you know, Force 11 has been working with CodeData 1 minute, yes, with CodeData, with the RDA group to create the data citation principle, which of course we obey to and we follow, and that's how we properly cite the data set. But we also, of course, in these cases, we are showing that we are citing linking to the institutional repository. And this slide in particular highlight the fact that there is a need for institutional repository and the data site to make sure that the namespace it's harmonized, because apparently in the data site metadata, the way that, as you can see, the publisher name is slightly different from the way that the DOI is maintained. So we need an harmonization between the name of the institutional repository. And this is really my last slide, where I say it's what do we require from repository being institutional global. We have a checklist on the website, and there are criteria which we follow and we look at through. And particularly, we need to make sure that when it's a discipline repository, community standards as content standards are implemented, that there are stable identifiers, and there is a preservation plan, and there is no restriction to the data set, of course, unless it's specific sensitive data, and so there is a way to access it. And with this, I just want to acknowledge everybody at Scientific Data, which is also a partnership with Dryden and Fixture as a generalistic repository supporting the journal, in addition to the 80 specific domain repository we support. And as I said, if you want to know more about the biosharing and the ISA Explorer, there are posters tomorrow. And thank you to Vasha to provide such nice slides.
Hello? Yes, great. So now we have some time for questions for our panel, and I hope you can join us. Susanna, come on down. And thanks again for being Varsha today. One of the larger questions we wanted to talk a little bit about was what we can do from a library standpoint in making our IRs that we support easier for groups to use in terms of putting data in and then tying them to the journals. And we've listened to a lot of different solutions today from a lot of different disciplines. What do you guys see in terms of a future for that as a whole? And after that, other questions, be thinking about things you want to ask.
Shall I go first? Okay, so I think that you can notionally have repositories that hold data and articles and research outputs and the rest of it, but I think in practice, certainly what I've seen, and particularly in the UK, data repositories tend to be separated from the traditional institution repository, partly because they have listing and partly they have a different way of representing the data and exposing the information around it. In terms of linking the research outputs to the data, I mean, I think over time, clearly there's the whole identifiers and linking the two to each other, and getting those, there's that push at the moment to get identifiers for outputs and other things out as quickly as possible on acceptance rather than traditionally once it's been published. Yeah. Sure.
I guess I'll again be the token humanist in the room and encourage libraries to think broadly about what data might be. And to the extent that I have been interviewing scholars, I didn't show this question, but embedded in there is one about what are your plans for your data? Where is it stored? How do you manage it? And the humanities scholars go, data? Huh? I don't think I have data. And then they say things like, well, I've got 10,000 digital images, kind of got them described. I've got hours and hours of audio recordings, oral history, so much. They have so much information that's in digital form and that they've collected and sometimes managed, and it needs a home. And that's one of the questions in Publishing Without Walls we're running up against quickly, is where's the home? Who takes care of it? But for me, I think this is research data. It's not numbers. Well, at some level it's numbers, but.
Yeah, I basically don't have too much to add. Just would like to emphasize that basically whatever outcome there is can be considered data. So if you publish traditional narrative articles, that's data to the text miner. And if you publish a traditional figure, there are people that are mining figures. So for instance, reconstructing phylogenetic trees from just the figures in published articles. So basically whatever you have, and be it the oral history, that's data to someone else potentially. And so with that mindset, we should really try to focus on making those individual pieces of the research cycle more interconnected and facilitating work across different research cycles. Like your research cycle might look different from mine, but we might have some intersection in terms of having certain audio recordings or things like that. And then it should be made easier to combine those things. And one of the prerequisites for doing that is actually make more of that public as a general attitude. And then we will have those reusers tell us how we should make it public so that they can actually reuse it.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience for the panel? Yes. Yell out your question, and I'll repeat it through the mic if we don't have a runner.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. So I'm a computer scientist. So usually my concerns are related not only to data sets or even source code, but also with the dependencies and libraries that are used when I'm running some software or some script analysis, right? And I guess in different natural science areas, we do use a lot of script analysis to analyze the data. And just recently I was trying to reproduce a paper, and I couldn't get the same results. And the reason was because I was using a different version of the library that the authors were using, right? So my question is, if you have thought about that when like publishing a paper or even publishing the data, like how this concerns about like the computation process behind it, how they can actually get to the process.
So the quick summary of that question, I hope, is how do you get more of the information out about the provenance of every component of the research, especially if it's a computational process, right?
Okay, start from here. Well, in case of scientific data, I liked it as experimental metadata that's machine readable, and the experimental metadata indeed does describes everything, all the steps. Well, up to a certain level of detail, but describing, for example, what type of software and what version, it's indeed part of it. As of course, knowing the location of the code, where it is, and we do recommend, and we do have data, for example, in GitHub.
Yeah, I think one thing you might be willing to look at is the software citation principles that have been drafted by a group here, which actually, and Dan Katz, who kind of is leading that effort, is there in the room. That effort is concentrated on trying to find out what level of detail would you need to have for certain use cases, and then how would that be represented in a certain metadata standard. That's one way to go. Even if we have that, it will still always be possible that the level of detail that some reuser needs is not available in the original source. On the other hand, more and more journals are getting interested in actually publishing negative results or replication studies. There is actually one journal called Re-Science that is specifically focused on just repeating computational studies. And they have a very elegant way of submitting to their journal. It's just a pull request to the table of content. Also a very interesting feature that most of the journals just can't think about because they're not that interactively set up. And in terms of Rio, we certainly welcome you to describe your software model. We welcome replication studies. We also welcome negative results and the data, whatever you have in the model.
Well, I guess I'll put on my information educator hat for a moment, and you may be aware of this, but these issues you're raising, hot topics in library science and information science now, and data curation, management, identification, authentication, reproducibility, and my kids, they're not really kids, but my classes of 20-somethings can talk about this with a fluency that many tenured scientists I know cannot. They've identified the issues and are focusing on them.
I think most points have been covered. It's a hot topic. I've heard people talk about virtual machines and packaging those up for reuse. And of course, as you go down over time, the more you package up, the more libraries you're packaging up, the more hard it will be in the future to try and recreate that work. It's a big area. I don't think I've got an answer while I sit here.
I think we've got time for one more question from the audience before we wrap up. I saw a hand up back here first, maybe.
Two questions. One is about Rio. Thank you. What role does peer review play in Rio's publishing process? And the second is for the Nature product. When you evaluate an institutional repository, and you think that institutional repository isn't good enough to host the data that relates to the data paper, is there any feedback given to that institutional repository, or is it sort of is that left to the scientists to go back and give that feedback?
Okay, let me go first. So Rio allows the author to choose the peer review model they would like to have. So they can choose the classical journal organized peer review. They can choose to go without peer review. They can choose, for instance, if they are publishing a grant proposal that has already been reviewed by the funder or so, they can choose to publish those reviews. It's up to the authors. The journal can handle whatever the authors want.
Thank you. And very briefly, yes, we have a questionnaire on the website, and I can guide you where it is. And the questionnaire, it's indeed filled by the institutional repository, reviewed by the journal, and is a discussion. So yes, we feel we make the comments, and if there is clarification need to be done. So it's not like one-off judgment, it's a discussion. Also because institutional repository, it's a relatively new thing. They are emerging, and there are many things which need to be indeed discussed and refined. I hope it helps.
And with that, I think we're getting close to time, so let's go ahead and thank our panelists again and continue this discussion as Forrest goes on.